Good morning. You are adjacent to a New Testament. Turn with me to Mark chapter 5. Mark chapter 5. And we're going to look at the exorcising of some demons from a man who is in a terrible, helpless state. Mark 5, verses 1 through 20. Before we dive in, let me just say thank you to those of you who are visiting with us. We've got at least a couple of folks that are here for the very first time, and we are truly grateful that you took the time and the effort to be here today and to look with us at the things of God, to worship Him. And we consider it an honor anytime we have a guest here. But we're genuinely grateful for every soul, every man, woman, child who is here. Mark chapter 5, beginning with verse 1. Mark chapter 5, beginning with verse 1. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs. No one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart. He broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. Sorry sight to behold. And so they came to the other side of the sea. The side of the sea northwest of Galilee, Sea of Galilee, is where Jesus does most of his ministry work. But the other side, called the Decapolis, literally 10 cities in Greek, was an area that had been populated by transplanted Greek peoples over the last 2-3 centuries prior to Jesus, east of the Jordan River. You have Greek peoples, Greek cities, Greek culture, Greek language, Greek amphitheaters, Greek gods, Greek everything. And it became kind of a thorn to the Jews on the western side of the Jordan, the western side of the Sea of Galilee. In fact, it was an affront. The Jews did not like stepping into the Decapolis because it was kind of like stepping into a foreign country. There was Greek culture that had invaded Judea, invaded Galilee, in Sepphoris, for example, just near Nazareth, essentially a Greek city. But this whole region of Decapolis was kind of a separate and apart region with its own distinct culture that was not exactly Jewish, to put it mildly. And so when they cross the Sea of Galilee and step into the region of the Gerasenes, or the region of the Gadarenes, as one account puts it, Gadara and Gerasa were 2 cities not far apart. Gerasa was actually inland, so it's probably not in the city of Gerasa that this occurs. It's probably closer to the coast. Gadara was a town closer to the coast. But the region in general is called the Decapolis. And you see part of the region with the Sea of Galilee in the distance there. And Jesus and his disciples get out of the boat, and immediately they're met by a man with an unclean spirit who comes from the tombs. And he has a history of being shackled and chained, and none of that works as a permanent bind because he is so strong, superhuman strength, that he just kind of breaks it as if it's nothing. He's a modern day Samson. And he takes rocks and he's cutting himself with the rocks, the stones. And I'm not going to say a lot about demon possession today. That's another lesson, another time, another topic per se. I'll simply say this, that one way of looking at demon possession and the victory of Christ and the apostles over demons, being able to exorcise them and cast them out of people, is a show of strength of God and the power of God over the power of the enemy. But another way of looking at that is the devastating collateral damage that the devil does with all of us on steroids. That we are caught up in a war zone, and that even though the demon possession that we read about in these accounts does not exist to the same extent, Christ and the apostles had this miraculous power that we do not have to be able to cast these things out. And we're told in no uncertain terms in 1 John 4:4, greater is he who is in you than he who is in the world. This is not some sort of dualistic struggle where if this kind of demon possession existed, then we would have the power to cast it out today, and we don't. But nonetheless, it is a microcosm of the power that Satan exerts with all of us in a general way, because we live in this war zone and none of us is completely insulated. In fact, I would just downright say it, all of us are damaged goods. None of us has been untouched by the power of the evil one in this world. All of us are subject to the carnage and the devastation, so that every one of us can say that I am a casualty of war. And the devil has infiltrated. He entered into Judas, according to Luke 22, about verse 2 and 3. But in the case of demon possession, it's a hostile takeover to the point that a person would no longer be in full control of his own faculties. And again, we have kind of a shadow of that in that when the devil's influence is alive and well in our own lives, we're not completely in our own right mind, are we? Again, it's not to the same extent, but it nonetheless is reflective of the damage that the devil has done to all of us. The antidote in this case would have required a miracle, an exorcism, miraculous power to rid a person of the influence of a demon from overtaking his own faculties. And so here's a man who is oppressed by a legion of demons. He is in a terrible state of affairs. And this man from the tombs, according to verses 1 through 5 that we've just read, he lives among the dead. He lives among dead people. The only people he couldn't hurt were people in tombs who were already dead and gone. And because of his being possessed by an unclean spirit, he had lost control of himself. He was no longer in total control of his own faculties. He had been bound with shackles and chains Because he was feared and rejected by the people of his home. He was a danger to society, so they tried to chain him up, and even those chains did not completely hold him at bay. He had uncontrollable superhuman strength, which enabled him to tear and break those shackles and led to the ruin of his relations with other people. Notable daily activities were constant screaming and wounding himself with stones. He was a danger not only to others potentially, but also a danger to himself. All the while he lived in nakedness. His appearance was a bloody mess of a naked person in total shame. And what I would like to say about all of that is, again, even though I don't believe that we have demon possession like this, the damage that the devil does in all of our lives is reflective of this. Because when the devil gets a hold of us, and before he gets done with us, we too are walking among the living dead. We lose a certain amount of control over our own lives because we're engaged doing nonsense. Danger to others and to ourselves. Ruin of relationships that otherwise would be healthy. We tend to inflict self-inflicted wounds upon ourselves. And we live in shame. So none of this is entirely unrelatable, even though, again, I think it's what the devil does to all of us on steroids. Here's a man who is totally messed up. As Romans 1:31 puts it for all of us, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. You can see what the devil does in the lives of people who continually go back again and again and again for more, with addictions, emotional pain, people in desperate conditions, people who are helpless and hopeless. And demonic forces are still at work, principalities and powers in the heavenly places. Paul speaks of them in Ephesians chapter 6. He speaks of doctrines of demons in 1 Timothy chapter 4. And so the devil's not completely done wrecking people's lives. And Jesus meets this man, or we may say the man meets Jesus. And you have in verse 6 beginning, when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before Jesus, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, what do you have to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me. For he was saying to him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And Jesus asked him, what is your name? And he replied, my name is Legion, for we are many. And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, send us to the pigs. Let us enter them. So he gave them permission, and the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs, and the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank and into the sea and drowned in the sea. You have a bunch of pigs. And they do not gaze near the Sea of Galilee today. These pigs are from Mount Olympus in Greece, but a similar scene. And you have a steep bank. This is one traditional site where this may have occurred, on the shores of Galilee, where you have a steep bank and they come trampling down and into the water. And so Jesus meets the man. The man approaches Jesus with surprising submission and desperate pleas. And I don't even begin to fully understand how this works when a demon possesses a man completely, is the man rushing to Jesus for help, or are the demons controlling that rush toward Jesus and to beg Jesus not to torment them? There seems to be an interplay somewhat between the two. You have a he in verse 10, and you have a they in verse 12, or verse 12. So there seems to be an interplay. And so he acknowledges Jesus' authority as king by bowing before him, and he shows that he desperately did not want things to change in his life. What Jesus was potentially doing in giving the word to have the demons cast out would be too painful for him. So verse 10 says he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. If this is the man trying to communicate this to Jesus against the overriding influence of these demons, then it would be kind of like this hostile takeover and a host comfortable with the parasite. And it's true when you have situations like multiple personality disorder and someone saying, well, the drugs are taking over his life, or which self is really speaking here. It's the evil impulse in him. It's the voice talking, but the dynamics and the intent are not in the man's best interest. Legion is not a morally neutral term in this day and age. You have Roman invaders called legions in the Roman army. But it may well be something akin to this idea of the Stockholm syndrome, where someone captive is comfortable with the captor and doesn't want that to change. Totally fine with it after a while. Status quo. And there's a comfort zone there. And so you have this begging of Jesus not to cast the demon out of the country. But nonetheless, to what extent this man may or may not have been involved in the plea, the demons certainly kick in and say, we are legion, we are many, cast us into the pigs. But what do we have to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God not to torment me. Well, Jesus responds to all of this with a command and a question. The command is for the unclean spirit to come out. The question is, what is your name? And in all of this, the man has something of an identity crisis. He had lost himself in the legion. The man with the unclean spirit, my name is Legion, we are many. Again, you've got the he of verse 10, the they or them of verse 12. And again, there's a microcosm here of what happens to all of us. Paul mentions in Romans 7 that when he gives himself over to what he does not really want to do, it's almost that as if that he's not doing it, but sin which dwells in me, he said. And again, there are times when the devil gets the better of us, when we're ultimately not even in our own right mind, even if we're not directly demon-possessed. But Jesus uses the word to execute his immense power and mercy to help free this man of the legion that had messed him up so badly. And he cares about this man. How many times had someone in the village, do you suppose, who had just had kindness enough to approach him and ask, what is your name? Had anybody done that? Jesus did. What is your name? Jesus wants to know him and to help him, unlike anybody else. So he uses his word, his mercy to execute his power, his mercy to set this man free. And to ultimately recreate this man's situation back to himself. In verse 14 through 17, we continue, the herdsman fled and told it in the city. and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, sitting there clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. So the herdsman ran away to the city. And you have a view of ancient Gadara, where this may have occurred, with shops. And they bring back city folk to the scene, and this man is sitting, and he's clothed, and he's in his right mind. And there's this intriguing statement that is made that those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and the pigs. They began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. Into verse 15 says that when they saw the man clothed and in his right mind sitting there, they were afraid. Now, they had been afraid of the man and chained him and isolated him, quarantined him, and now they see him sitting, clothed and in his right mind, and then they're really afraid. Irony of ironies. Jesus helps a man, completely revolutionizes, changes his life, and they are frightened at what Jesus does with this man. I don't know how to explain that completely. You can't inject the gospel by force. People have to ingest the gospel by free will. But seeing what happens with this man, they become afraid. They're very afraid. And they beg Jesus to leave. Like a guard dog protecting the border. You need to get out of here. And you need to leave us and our pigs alone. And even though this is not Jewish territory, it's Gentile territory, to an original Jewish audience, the irony of 2,000 pigs going into the sea, getting rid of bacon in the Jewish world would have put some smiles on some Jewish faces. And that may not be readily the case in our own culture, but no Jew hearing this for the first time would not have seen some irony in all of this. But they're afraid because of what Jesus has actually done with this man. And I would suggest to you, people are still afraid of the power of the gospel when it heals people and frees them of dependency on unhealthy things, situations, and people, that they're afraid that people could actually be independent and in their right mind. What Jesus is able to do with people scares people who are on the other side of the fence sometimes. So you have this response to Jesus. The herdsmen run away, come back to townspeople. They become afraid, beg Jesus to leave. And Jesus does that. He fulfills their request, and he leaves unceremoniously. And so we read the final section of this paragraph in verse 18. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. So the man realizes, I'm in a much, much better place now that Jesus has got a hold of me and gotten these demons out of me. And he's clothed, he's in his right mind, he's sitting, and then he comes down to the boat where Jesus is getting into the boat. "Can I come with you, please?" You've blessed my life to such an extent. I want to be with you. I want to go with your disciples. And Jesus says no. but go and tell people in your own territory what God has done for you, what the Lord has done for you. And he goes out and he tells everybody what Jesus has done for him. So he went away to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. These are scenes from Decapolis. And he would go from place to place. You've got to hear what Jesus has done for me. And people are marveling at him for a completely different reason now. And I want to reflect on that just for a few minutes, and then we're done. He becomes an apostle, not in the official sense of the 12, but one sent forth with a commission by Jesus to tell what great things the Lord had done for him, and he tells everybody what Jesus had done for him. Sometimes Jesus tells people not to tell. That's usually in Jewish territory, because he doesn't want that misrepresentation of messianic fever in Jewish territory to take hold of the crowds and interrupt his mission that is God-given because of human misconceptions about the divine mission. But in the Decapolis, where people are hearing stories about Jesus as well, they need to hear more about Jesus, and he gives this man the commission to go out and tell it to people. And he does just that in this Greek area. And the man begins to tell everybody about what great things Jesus had done for him. And so the man's request is to follow Jesus. Jesus says no. He gives the man a mission, and the man fulfills the mission. Jesus would later come back to this same region, end of chapter 7 on into chapter 8, would miraculously feed the 4,000 in this region, perform some healings. You have at the end of chapter 7, healing of a deaf man. That occurs in this general region as well. And so the man goes and tells others what Jesus had done for him. I think we make a mistake when we baptize people into Christ and then we sit them down for months or even years and tell them, you just need to learn. And don't go out and tell anybody about it. That's a huge mistake. A new convert may not be able to tell everybody everything about everything, but a new convert can begin to tell others what good things God has done in their lives and what Jesus has done for them. All of us should be able to tell someone else what Jesus has done for us. We may not be able to quote every passage. We may not be able to articulate every concept. But if you're a Christian, you should be able to tell someone else what God has done for you, what Jesus has done for you. And that's what this man does. He tells others what Jesus has done for him. So we're going to sing a song in just a moment, but let me bring all this to a close by saying this. No messed up person or situation should cause us to turn and run, no matter how messy, overpowering, or frightening it may be. This man was a frightening mess at the beginning of this episode. And Jesus embraces him and tries to help him. That's a lesson for us. Jesus shows his power and his mercy to this messed up man. And we need to show God's grace and mercy and power to people that we run into as well. To fundamentally change his life before versus his life after, it's a painful change, yet a necessary process in order to be made new in Christ. And we've got to get rid of the bad in order to embrace the good in repentance as well. Demons, in this case, led to a loss of identity, subsequent fear, and a desperate hold. And the devil's agents, his angels, his demons do destructive things to our lives as well. Jesus' word is the key to getting things right for the messed up people of this world, this man as well as us. For Jesus, a soul is worth a dangerous boat trip, the loss of a lot of pigs, an embarrassing rejection by a whole city, and a new relationship with another messed up follower. How much is a soul worth to you? People don't understand, or people who don't understand Jesus will often reject Jesus and want him away from their lives and their territory. And they're afraid of his influence in this wicked world. But Jesus' mercy for this messed up person runs deep and wide, and his mercy for us runs deep and wide as well. And we have to have the same compassion and mercy for messed up people in our own lives. Jesus is more interested in giving the messed up what we need for a living rather than giving us what we ask for in life. This man wanted to follow Jesus, and Jesus says no. But he gives him another commission. And sometimes Jesus asks us to do things that we would rather consider plan B, but it's his plan A. In order to share the gospel, you don't have to know a lot, but you do need to know Jesus. That's what this man shared, Jesus and what he had done for him. Jesus uses the weak things to do great things so that God will ultimately be glorified. Jesus used a man that everybody was afraid of, a man who was not in his right mind, a man who was naked, wounded, in shackles, and everybody was afraid of him, to go out and tell to all Decapolis what great things God had done for him. It's amazing what changes Jesus can make in a person's life, even a person who's completely messed up. And even new converts must be empowered to join in the ministry of the gospel, to tell others about Jesus. We all should be able to do that. You don't need a PhD degree in evangelism to go out and tell someone else what God has done for you, what Jesus has done for you. Has Jesus done something good for you? And you go out and tell somebody about that, just like this man did. And you can make a huge difference, just like this man did. Great lessons in all of this. We're going to sing a song of invitation. Just as Jesus helped this man and completely turned his life around, Jesus can help you and completely turn your life around. Think about that as we sing the song, Why Not Now?